So the best 4 years of your life, John, I presume?
You know it was Malik.
And
Especially in
what?
third year when I was in your class.
Well, that was fascinating. Was it KTH B109 or B104? It was a
Uh,
closet.
it was a closet, but we made it into the Narnia closet in there. We made do for sure.
We did. There was some magic happening with that group of 25.
Absolutely.
So tell me about your trip to, you took time off and went on a personal development commitment to Africa. And I never got to unpack that with you.
Yeah, so that was quite frankly the most amazing experience of my life. And I found out about that through a friend that I had in a life sciences program at Mac, and she mentioned that she went to Kenya and that it was absolutely life changing. So a week later, I was signed up and ready to go, bought my tickets, no joke, and I was set to go the following year. And what I did over there was I was working with an NGO called Lifted Strong, which worked with a group of 12 women within Arusha, which is one of the larger cities in Tanzania. And these women were almost all HIV positive and, living, financially day to day. And unfortunately, in Tanzania, if you're a woman, if you have HIV, you're highly marginalized against and sort of segregated from society. So it's very difficult. It was very difficult, still is very difficult for these women to find income for themselves. So the reason that I was there was, of course, to learn from the culture, and I absolutely did learn an incredible amount from being in that environment, but also to try to do anything I could to translate the knowledge I had at that point from 3 years of business and teach them about entrepreneurship and about starting their own business. So it was fantastic. We set up chicken programs because we found out that was one of the best ways to gain sustainable income in a sort of low income country, is to breed chickens and sell the eggs and sell the chicks. We set up a cooking class for tourists to see. We completely reorganized how they were keeping track of their finances and organizing themselves managerially, and ultimately it was successful, and we'd made great progress up until the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and that's been very challenging, I think, for me personally to deal with, seeing the impact, obviously, that COVID has had on our lives, but just exponentially so in lower income countries. Seeing, unfortunately, a couple of the women that I worked with pass away due to them being immunosuppressed due to HIV, and also the fact that there was a pandemic ravaging them. So that's been very challenging, but I do hope to make it back to East Africa someday soon.
Well, that's fascinating and inspiring. I know I kept track of it a little bit, never got to really chat with you more about it, but we'll do that at another time. I did want to bring it up, though, because I think you curated for yourself a life-changing experience. And I think it's going to shape you as a business mind, as a business leader, maybe as an entrepreneur, but certainly it's already shaped you as a human being. So thank you for doing that.
And I thank the people that I worked with, because you're absolutely right. I mean, everything that I've done since then has stemmed from that experience. And I do hope that I can give back in the same way that they've given me this amazing perspective. So yeah. And we'll touch on that, I'm sure. Again.
Yeah. So tell me, you're at the cusp of a new journey. You're, so to say, all done and ready to conquer the world. So what's next, John?
Yeah, it's a loaded question. You may know, but and I think everyone who knows me quite well, I always have plenty of ideas rolling around my head. So right now I'm working at Volvo in business operations and really enjoying that. I'm working directly with the management team to sort of make sure that everything is under control on the corporate side of things, advancing their sustainability mission. So I'm enjoying that right now. I'm also starting a global health master's degree at Mac in the fall. So I'll be able to work with students from India and Sudan and Norway and Netherlands and Colombia. So I'm really looking forward to that, seeing how global health projects are managed and how they can probably be managed better, hopefully. And so that's sort of the immediate future and what I'm focused on. But as you know, Malik, I've been interested in medicine for many years, and I've sort of been working towards applying to medical school, getting all the requirements that there are many, but getting all the requirements needed to go through that process. And that's still on my mind. I would say it's a little bit on the back burner. I'm wanting to see what I can do at Volvo and also with this global health master's sort of at the helm of an organization rather than sort of investing in my own education right out the gate when I just finished doing that in my commerce program. So that's still on my mind, but we'll see where I go with that. And you touched on it as well in entrepreneurship. I'm very interested in entrepreneurship. I ultimately think, regardless of what path I go down, that I'll start my own company one day, and hopefully at the intersection of sustainability. So a lot of the work I'm doing at Volvo, global health. So obviously the work in the global health degree, and also at the intersection of technology, which is an area I'm trying to improve myself at, trying to teach myself how to code right now. And so we'll see how that goes in the future. But many ideas.
and keep them coming, John, because you don't know what the next moment of change is, what takes you where, and you're joining a degree program in the midst of the biggest global health crisis in 100 years, and I'm glad you're committing yourself to it. Which makes me wonder, you're at the intersection of technology, sustainability, health, business, and some of this has been shaped by your experience at DeGroote. So share with us your best memory of your time at DeGroote.
Well, my favorite memories at DeGroote were, I would say, not related to what I specifically just said, but more so related to the people I met. And I think the strength that we have at DeGroote is that the students are so socially conscious. They're so socially aware, and they value diversity like no business students I've seen before. And they value social causes like no students I've seen before. So some of my favorite memories, honestly, have been in being in group meetings in international business or in entrepreneurship and working on problems with my classmates, and it being sort of no doubt in our minds that whatever we work on has to have some social mission behind it. So those are kind of the best experiences for me. But ultimately, Welcome Week has been amazing for me in my personal development. I mean, when I was a first year student, I met my best friends 3 days into school because of Welcome Week. And, I still see them on a weekly basis. We're all back in Ottawa. So to call that week a success for me would be a massive understatement. And then I ultimately was able to become a rep on the Green Suits team. So I just have an outstanding network of, friends who I was able to work with on that. And then a year later, I had the pleasure to lead that team as well. So I can't understate the impact that Welcome Week and that Green Suits has had in my life. And I also want to thank you, because my favorite week, or the most notable week in my life at DeGroote, was in a large part spurred by you, Professor Malik, and it was one of the reasons I wanted to speak to you today, is that I had this week in November where the weekend, so it starts on Friday. The weekend starting on Friday, I went to a conference at Queen's University. It was the QCO conference, which is a health conference mainly for sort of pre-med students. And we looked at problems in global health and how they relate especially to child and maternal health. And I got back from that conference feeling very enlightened. As you can see, it probably spurred my ultimate, ambition to do this master's degree. You can see that connection. I got back on Monday from that conference. I had a midterm that Monday in, I forget what class. And then on Tuesday, I left for a sales competition that Malik had set up for myself and a colleague and friend named Dal. So on Tuesday, we left for this sales competition in New Jersey. And by Tuesday night, Dal and I had made our way to Manhattan. And that night, that afternoon, I had an interview with a representative at Volvo for the CIP internship program, which ultimately that interview that I did in that cafe in Manhattan for that sales competition was the job that I ended up landing and am currently still in. And, just in preparation for that sales competition, talk about kicking me out of my comfort zone, Dal and I both. So thank you for that, Malik. And we ended up doing really fairly well at the
You
competition.
Did?
Yes,
Yeah,
I think we got 11th out of 50 students from or 50 teams from mainly against students from dedicated sales schools. So we got there. You set us up with the right people in preparation for it. So that was a crazy week, but sticks out in my mind as one of the most memorable.
Life works in wondrous ways. So I'm glad you found community at DeGroote. I too know that I found community at DeGroote, whether it's alumni I'm in touch with from 20 years ago, or my colleagues, or alumni I will soon be in touch with 2 weeks from now, right? And that could be you. So talking about community, are there people, are there peers that you would want to reference who supported you through this journey?
Oh, absolutely. I would be remiss if I didn't mention my parents, who, obviously come from a different generation. I think one where the tracks were more set, and I come from a generation where people like to jump around quite a bit in their careers. And nonetheless, me having many thoughts about where I want to take my life and throwing them for a loop on many occasions. They've been unconditionally supportive and loving of myself and my sister. So I mean, they're my rocks for sure. So I wouldn't be where I am without them. I'd also have to recognize the professors and the instructors that I've had over the years. I mentioned how in your class, you pushed me, noticing that I was very engaged with the material and like to run my mouth in class. You pushed me to do more with the sales competition and by having me lead a class at one point. And so stuff like that, I think, goes a long way because it's recognizing that students, I think, are going above and beyond and giving them other opportunities to excel. So things like that you've done, and Candace Chow is another professor that comes to mind who's challenged me. Marvin Ryder is another one. There's Dr. Sean Park in Health Sciences Department, the instructor team of the Global Health class in the Health Sciences Department, and many others who I'm sure I could name, but I'm forgetting right now, have pushed me in ways that sort of I can't even vocalize. And finally, my friends. I've mentioned my green suits family, for lack of a better term, that I've made over the course of 5 years. So they're obviously unconditionally supportive. I feel like I could reach out to any one of them at any time And it's crazy to me how close people get over the course of a week, where they're sort of sweating and getting sunburnt and yelling together. It's very team building. And I also mentioned my friends my friend group who I met during that first welcome week in first year, and I've been best friends with ever since. And they've been absolutely outstanding. Especially, I lived with many of them throughout the pandemic, and that's been very challenging for all of us, I think, and myself included. Struggling with some mental health issues, some anxiety, some depressive periods. So leaning on them throughout that time to bring me up when I'm down, or to talk through things with, or to encourage me to seek help from the resources at McMaster has been amazing. And I can't thank them enough. And I'm happy to say that through hard work, because it has been hard work, that I'm feeling a lot better now. I'm feeling in a way better place than I was in throughout the winter. But is one of the most challenging periods of my life, and I'm glad that I had those people to rely on through those times.
That's awesome to hear. Quite early on in my class, I could sense, John, that discomfort was your comfort zone.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I've had a mantra, and this is true. I've had a mantra since first year, that challenge equals change. And my thought is that if I'm changing, then I'm learning, and if I'm challenging myself, then I'm learning. So I seek that out as much as possible, and be the first one to raise my hand, sometimes to my own detriment, but that is my mantra. So I'm glad you noticed that.
I presume that's your key message to the incoming class of 2021, challenge equals change. Or is there more you'd like to add to a student who's starting out at DeGroote in another 3 months?
Yeah, so challenge equals change is the biggest one, I would say. The other sort of guiding mantra that I have came from a book that I read by Chris Hadfield, who's of course Canadian astronaut, and he writes about right before he's about to embark on a 6-month stay on the International Space Station, first Canadian to be the commander of the International Space Station, and he's recognizing the risk involved with what he's doing. And I'm trying to remember the specific thing that he says in the book. But essentially the premise is that he's recognizing that this thing that he's doing is very risky, but nonetheless, he's prepared for, upwards of 4 years for this 6-month trip. And he feels so strongly in the purpose of what he's doing that the risk is worth it. And I think that in our world, where I think people are becoming increasingly paralyzed to act because they're afraid of failure or any other event that might involve some form of risk, I think it's important to keep in mind that risk is worth it sometimes. If you're sure of what you're doing, if you have a purpose, if you have a cause to what you're doing, then risk is worth it. So that would be sort of what I would encourage people to keep in mind. Challenge equals change, and take on thoughtful, calculated risks if it's worth it to you.
Awesome. Well, I must add that you will forever be a part of the DeGroote community, and I know the DeGroote community will forever be a part of your life. Thank you for making the choice to come to DeGroote, and thank you for making the DeGroote community better with your presence, John.
I hope that is true for sure. So I appreciate that thought. Thanks a lot, Malik, and everything that you've done over the years.
I mean that most sincerely.
Thank you.
If I were to ever launch a whiskey, I will call it John Collins.